workshop for internal training purposes. And everybody who is okay with that, please go ahead and either react to it with a little thumbs up, or you can do, you can say, I agree or I on the chat as well. Thank you. Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Steve, for your thumbs up. Thank you, Janice. All right, so let's see. We're going to start with this Topspro Enterprise Basics, where we're going to learn all the ins and outs about, or the basics about Topspro Enterprise. Let me do another share. I would like to share my Topspro Enterprise. Give me 1 second. Okay, so we have here. All right. So I'm going to do another screen share here. And what I am sharing now is my Topspro it's my, hold on. Can you see my screen, Janice?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to start again, sorry, in our CASAS homepage. Just to let you know that this is our go-to page for information, a lot of information that we have posted in here, as well as we have help documentation and videos from the online training. And I'm going to post these links on the chat pod just for you to know where to find this information. We can find a lot of more information as well as documentation videos in that link. Now, in order to use Topspro Enterprise, there are some system requirements that are also listed here on our website, as well as I'm going to post this on the chat pod. Just to give you a quick heads up, is that you're going to need a Windows 10 computer in order to install Topspro Enterprise. And how do we get to Topspro Enterprise? Well, we just need to go to the website. Whether you are a California-based user or any other agent, and if you're in any other state, Missouri, Pennsylvania, any other state, you can use this website, etestsonline.org. When you get to the website, you can click on Install TE Client. This button will allow you to download and install the Topspro Enterprise software. As you can see, we have this TE Client application. Once we install, because I already have it installed in my computer, it's not going to ask me to install. But if you're installing it for the first time, it will ask you if you want to install it for the first time. When it installs, it automatically brings you to the Topspro Enterprise software. In this case, we have different servers depending on where you are at, what state you're at. You can use the global, the California, Miami-Dade, but in this case, for today's training purposes, I am going to use a Rolling Hills simulation server, and we have documentation on the links that I provided you before in the chat, where you can find how to connect to the Rolling Hills database. In this case, I am going to use 4908 for the agency ID number. And I am going to use administrator and the number 22 at RHAS, and the password would be admin, all lowercase. Once I connect, this is going to give me an access to a very similar level or type of access that you may have as an administrator. By the way, please feel free to interject at any moment if you have any questions, or you can feel free to also post them on the chat box. All right, so once we get to this page where we're able to log into the Topspro Enterprise, we will find this start page, which contains several links to information or to listers on how to open several listers in here, and how to do there are some shortcuts and some reports, for instance, that I have generated in my own computer. And there's other information and important news and alerts or notifications from CASAS. You can simply click the X box to close the start page. But this is how you can see the blank page. This is how you log into Topspro Enterprise. And if you hover your mouse over, you're going to see that the menus on the top left are clickable or are available for you to click on. If you hover your mouse on the TE icon, you can see how you are connected. It will provide you with your agency ID number in case you're calling tech support and you don't remember exactly what your agency ID number is, but you're logged into Topspro Enterprise. You can just hover your mouse over the TE icon and it's going to provide you with the agency ID, the name, and your username. So if we click on this file, this Topspro Enterprise menu works very similarly to any Windows-based operating or program that you may have available. As you can see, there's different options available for you to click on. You can lock your computer if you're gonna take a quick break, or if you're in your office and that's a shared computer, you can definitely disconnect. You can change your password and do other options in this menu. Then we have the view menu. I am going to see, you can have the start page, bring it back to where it was before, or you can do dashboard or change your font size, small, normal, medium, and large. In this case, I'm going to increase the view to large, and hopefully that's better for you on your end. Now I'm going to go over the rest of the menus. The organization menu will pertain to records about your agency. So in regards to the users that you have at your local agency, if you have several coworkers that need access to the database or need to create an account for them because they have completed the proctor trainings, if you do e-tests or any other purposes, if you want to give them access in order to generate reports or verify their students' records, their information, here is where you want to go to, the organization menu. This is pertaining to records about your agency. And we're going to go over a few of these in just a moment. But right now I'm going to go through the records menu. Now the records menu will give you records about or pertaining about your students, because here's where you're going to find all your students' information, their demographic information, their test data, all their information in regards to running reports or just verifying and looking up like their tests or anything else about the student. So organization pertains to records about your agency, and records menu pertains to records about your students. Now reports, it's pretty self-explanatory. It will bring up all the reports that we have available in Topspro Enterprise. Now, depending on your level of access, meaning as if you have an enhanced access or a basic access, then this is probably going to be looking a little bit different from your point of view whenever you log into your organization. So for the basic access, we have 8 basic reports that will provide you test results information, web test administration reports, and some demographic information about your students. And for the enhanced users, you will have the rest of the reports open that you can see over here in this view from the Rolling Hills. Now, we highly encourage to use the Rolling Hills database anytime that you have any questions about how to run a report. I actually encourage you to go in there as much as you can so you can practice. That's what it's for. The Rolling Hills database is the pre-populated database that we have there for you to practice. There's nothing you can break in Topspro Enterprise Rolling Hills. In fact, I would encourage you to try to break something, because that is what it's for. And this database, it refreshes nightly. So anything that you do one day, it won't be there the next day. It's going to reset back to how it was before. Does anybody have any questions so far? You can give me a thumbs up if you feel like we can continue. If you feel like I'm going too fast, go ahead and let me know on the chat. Okay, thanks for the thumbs up. I see that you're perfect. Thank you so much. All right. All right. So next menu is the tools menu. Here we have some specialized wizards and some specialized or some different import exports that we can have available. We may not have time to go through every single one of them, but just to let you know that there are tools in case you have Topspro Enterprise shakes hands with other data recording systems, like any other attendance systems that you may be using as a third party, then Topspro Enterprise can communicate back and forth with those attendance systems. So these are where the tools you're going to find in order to make those connections. And then we also have the help menu, where you can find some content and the release notes that we have every time that we have a new build. And of course, the end user license agreement that was recently added. All right, so now I showed you how to install and open the Topspro Enterprise, and we already went through navigating this menu. So now we're going to identify some reports here under the reports. I know that being a new user in Topspro Enterprise, you may be already like immediately asked to generate some reports, and you probably are wondering, where am I going to get that? Well, it's under the reports menu and has several options depending on what you would like to see. Right now, I'm going to demonstrate a really nice report I like to show our customers from the test results, because here is where we can find everything about the students' information when they tested. So the reports menu, when you click on test results, you're going to find another sub menu. As you can see, this unfolds other records in here. So for this purpose, I am going to click on the skills profile, and it gives me another two options. So once I click on one of these options, which is the individual skills profile report, it's going to open the report setup navigator, which you can see it has many options. And trust me, folks, I was there too. I was going, this is nuts. This is too much information. I have too many options. I don't want to deal with this. But trust me, once I did this exercise, you can unclick or click on these collapsible buttons. If you hover your mouse, you'll see that says collapse. And that way, I know that it only has 5 sections. So for this purpose, I am going to collapse all of them and just be opening them one by one. So we take it one step at a time. I'll unclick on uncollapse for the session name. And this is the session name that will appear on your report. As you can see, there are scrolling bars at the bottom section. And once we continue uncollapsing these others, we'll see another scrolling bar towards the right-hand side. So report setup navigator on your left-hand side will always appear whenever you're going to generate a report, so you can have other options to select from, whether you want to generate a report for a particular class or generate a report for a particular student or for a particular assessment form, etc. We have several options in here. Continuing with our first section, you can edit the session name if you'd like. It will always bring up the report name inside the session name, as well as the date, the hour or the time that you're trying to generate it, and your information about your user. You can also add additional comments in this field for your own internal purposes. Now I'm going to uncollapse the next common filter category, or expand this one. Here, you're going to find other options like program years and programs, as well as class status. Now, if you have enhanced access, you will be able to manage classes by entering these into your system, as well as enrolling students and adding attendance to those students. But if you have basic access, you won't have access to classes or generate or make any other selections from there. I mean, it will still be there on the report, but you won't, be able to select for any type of classes. So here you have the option to select for which program year you want to generate this report for. You can also, there are, in the program years, there's different reports that will have a different marking in here, in this area where program years exist. Some of the reports will have a square in the program years for each of the program years. That means that you can select multiple program years and run that report at the same time for the multiple program years. Reports are going to show each program year with a circle. Whenever that happens, you may only generate that report for that particular year at the same time. So you won't be able to add, like here, I'm adding multiple years. That way I can generate a report that includes data of each of the individual program years. Okay, so it looks like we have a question in the chat pod. It says, does Topspro Enterprise connect with Literacy Pro? Literacy Pro, I think I've heard of that. Is that an attendance system, Andy, that you use at your local agency? If so, I believe it should be able to make that connection. Now, we have a document that has the specifications about what to bring over from those files, but we can talk about it a little bit later. Okay, in Connecticut. Okay, Andy, sounds good. We're going to talk about it a little bit later whenever we're onto that section, and give you more information on that. Okay, so now for the common filters, I am just going to select the current program year. And then the programs that you have in here are, as you can see, there are 4 that are basically selected. I would just leave it to the defaults in that particular case. That means that it requires, to generate this report, it requires that the student has a program enrollment into any of these 4 basic programs that are checked by default. Now, I uncollapsed the other section, which is the date ranges. You can also run a report for any student who has activity like in the last 2 days, or any of the options that you have here, or you can type in your own date, start and end dates, or for the activity. You can customize your report accordingly. Or whenever your student had an assessment, let's say all who assessed last month, we can do it as well. You can make multiple selections into your settings. I'm going to expand output layout parameters. You can see that there are some options already listed here by default. I would just simply keep it to the defaults. If you'd like to change your report to black and white, green, or red, by default it's set up to blue, and as you can see, it already has some default settings. And if you want to show the grade level equivalent to this report, which I found it is very popular, I would just hit this checkbox in here. And finally, expanding now the special options, you can do some GED predictor knowledge if you'd like. You can do GED and HiSET, GED only. So as you can see, you have several options and choices to do in here. So I'm just, again, going to keep it to the defaults. That way we don't get too complicated. And then I will go to, because our Rolling Hills database is huge, is too large, it has too many students in there, I would like to select a few classes from my Navigator on the left. That way it doesn't give me too much information, or it will give you a warning. If the report will generate for more than 400 pages, it's going to say your report has too many pages, please reset the values, so it doesn't take that long to load. So in this particular case, I am going to select a few classes from here, and then hit the generate button on the top area. This is going to take a few seconds, and it's probably going to give me a progress bar, or this little gear that it's running, that it means that it's trying to pull up all that information that I asked for. So now that the report has generated, I can see that it has 15 pages. This is a little counter that we have here. It's going to give me the individual skills profile report, which contains the name of the student, the ID number, agency, your agency and your program that the student is enrolled in, as well as the most recent test that the student has taken. As you can see, it describes the form number, the date the student took the assessment, what scale score they got, the NRS level they're in, and the rest of information. You can read it for yourselves. And here, hopefully everybody can see my screen. And it also includes the grade level equivalent, which I find that it's very popular that you want to know, would like to know what grade equivalents to based on their results from their test, as well as including the reading competencies, as well as the CASAS content standards and the percentages for every one of the content standards. So if I continue scrolling down, as you can see, we have the rest of the pages populated with that same criteria. And we have several options. You can unpin this navigator in order to have like a better view of it. You have different layout settings. You can export the report, you can print it, and you can navigate from one page to the next one by clicking on these little arrows on the top area. You can also do a fit page, so you can see the entire page in your screen. You can see 2 pages at a time. You can fit width, so that's how I had it before, in the fit width, so it can give me a bigger view of the information of the page. Any questions so far? Okay, it looks like we have a question here. How quickly after a testing session is the student report available to be printed? That's a very good question, Megan. Thank you so much for that. Immediately. That is immediately. As soon as the student finishes the test successfully and they end it, the information automatically comes from eTest Online into Topspro Enterprise. Now, for those students who test manually, they have a paper assessment. I don't know if you combine both at the same time. You can then enter it manually, the assessment into Topspro Enterprise, and then immediately run a report once you save it. We have another question from Lee Ann. Can you export just 5 of the 15 pages? That is a really good question. It actually brings you the whole export. It exports the entire amount of pages in here. We don't have an option to, if I click the export button, we don't have an option to only do in a certain amount of pages. So we would probably assist you or advise you to filter for one particular student at a time. And this is a really good question, Will, which I was heading next. Get a report for just one student. I am going to show you how to do it for one particular student. Again, clicking on the reports menu. Let's generate a different report this time. Let's try under test results. Let's try the competency performance. The student competency performance report can be generated for one student at a time. Yes, in this particular case, to generate it for one student, from the navigator on the left, I would advise to click on in-program years. When you click on in-program years, on the right-hand side, it's going to give you a list of all the students that have activity in the current program year. As you can see, we have a little counter here that will give you 6,771 students. That's a lot of information. So if I wanted to only filter for one particular student at the time, I can click this little filter button that looks like a little funnel. I'll click on it for the student ID. And I will just type this ID number right here that I am looking at, so I don't get complicated, 0350539. And once I type in the ID number, I can also do this little drop down and say contains. When we select contains, it broadens our search. If we miss like a number in here, for instance, I am going to delete the 9 so I can see what options, so it tries to match to whatever it is that approximates to it or that contains those series of numbers. So it's up to you whether you can do starts or ends with or equals, but I would always suggest to do contains, as that broadens your search. And that immediately pops up the student that I wanted to show on the report. Once I have one student in here, I can then simply click the generate button. But if you want to generate it for 5 particular students, then I wouldn't do this filter right here. I would actually remove this filter and uncheck the general check boxes on the top. So let's say you want to pick and choose from a lister, but you find it kind of hard to go through this sorting, because as you can see, here are some sorting buttons and some filter buttons inside the column headers. You see these little buttons that look like a little diamond, but in reality are 2 triangles or 2 arrows, one pointing up and one pointing down. The arrow that points up and is in a different color, like in this case, the student ID, that will tell you what the sorting for this particular list is. For instance, it's sorted by student ID. If you would like to sort it by name, you can definitely click on the arrows, the sorting buttons, and this list will alphabetize from A to C on the first name. So let's say you want to check just a few students. I will again reset these arrows back to uncheck them and just check a random selection of students that I want to generate the report for. And that way, only the ones that I have checked the boxes for are going to appear on my report. And hopefully, they have tests. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the generate button and see what that brings us. Again, I am going to unpin the report viewer navigator, so that gives us a little bit more space to observe this other report that I want to show you. So in this case, we have here the student performance report. It gives you the student's name, their ID number, the date where they tested, raw score, scale score, and it gives you all the positions, all the questions that they did during the assessment as well. I mean, all the competencies that they responded successfully, if they were correct or not, and it gives you the competency and the task item as well. And position means question number 1, question 2, 3, 4. So this is a really good report as well. It can give you about 2 or sometimes 3 pages per student. So this is kind of like a long report per student, whereas other reports only give you 1 page per student, depending on which report you're running. So there's other questions in here. I see that my coworker Tyler and Janice are taking care of responding some of the questions. So thank you so much, guys, for your assistance. Anybody else has any questions so far about navigating through the menus and generating some specific reports? Okay. All right, folks, I'll take that as a no, and we'll continue following along here. As you can see, we generated another report, the student competency performance. And we have, as you can see, every time you generate a different report, it populates a different tab. Like you were opening different tabs in your web browser, for instance, something very similar to that. And you can toggle back and forth within the different tabs, and you can actually rearrange them if you want to pull them over to in different order. Like if you want to drag it and pull it over to another area in your Topspro Enterprise, it will also do that for you. Another report that we can slightly touch on, because I just want to show you, in case you use e-test or you test your students on paper assessment, when they finish the e-test online assessment, they get this personal score report right after they finish a test, and it tells them what level they're at and the scale score. So you can reproduce easily that report from Topspro Enterprise. If you go to the CASAS, to the reports menu, CASAS test, personal score report. This personal score report, again, is going to give them their information. Remember, folks, no need to get anxious about all these options. Remember that they can be collapsed and expanded as you feel free to do it. And then from the Navigator on the left, I'm going to run it for a few individual students. If I click on in program years, again, this is where to go to whenever you want to generate it for a few students and not everybody in your agency. So I'll uncheck that general check mark on the box on the top and just select a few students. So I will generate my personal score report now. And I'm gonna, again, unpin the Navigator because I feel like my screen is too small. I'm using a laptop and this is probably not gonna show you very good information here. Now I'm gonna fit to page. I know that looks a lot smaller, but this is gonna show you that complete report that the students get right at the end of their test. And you can easily reproduce that once again from Topspro Enterprise. It gives you the levels, the form number they took, the date when they tested, the scale score, and also the level that corresponds to that assessment score. There is another question here. There are a couple questions from our chatbot. Lee Ann, can you export only the student's latest performance report if they have taken multiple assessments? Yes, actually our reports always pull the data from the latest assessment. When it comes to the personal score report, it may generate the different assessments that the student has done. And you want to export the student's latest performance report. Yes, you can do some other rearrangements here under the menu. If we go back to the personal score report setup Navigator under the general settings, you can say the date range. For instance, this particular student, it had 2 assessments. Let's see if the dates are different. The first assessment the student took in math was January 14th. And this one is a little bit in the future. It's on May. So if we want to generate only for the May report, then we can go back to personal score. As we can see, that was May 15th. It's a little bit in the future, but this is what our Rolling Hills database has information for the entire program year. So I know that the assessment date was May 15. May 15, I can simply type in the fields for the date ranges, or I can click on the drop down and select the date from this little calendar here. So I'll do from May 15 to May 15th. And I already have the certain amount of students checked from the in-program years. So that is going to be helpful because I will just simply click generate again, and that should only give me 1 page instead of the 2 assessments, the one from January and the one from May. As you can see here, it has page 1 of 2, but in reality, the second page is just the criteria. So I'm going to fit to page and unpin this report Navigator. As you can see, it only has the May date. And if I move along to the next page, this is just the criteria that was applied to this report. And it has a bunch of numbers and information, but it tells me what I was filtering for. So again, the report can be generated just for a particular assessment date. And that's how you can generate it for 1 student. Okay, we have other questions on here. I'm not sure if we can address them or they've already been answered for, okay, so Tyler, thank you so much for answering those questions again. Tyler will continue in just a moment explaining a lot of other information for our Topspro Enterprise Basics. And now we will continue from this point forward. I will I noticed that if you noticed, I have a bunch of tabs open in here. Now I want to clear all these tabs and start fresh in my Topspro Enterprise. So I will just go ahead and click on the Pages button on the top right corner, and I will close all pages. Wow. That way it gives me a little sense of relief that I can start working now on other things, like some menus that I would like to show you how you can customize. We have different listers that you can populate in regards to your students' information, your students' data, and how you can customize them. So you can have the best experience when you join Topspro Enterprise every time you log in. So I'm going to go to the records menu and then click on students and then demographics. Records, students, demographics. This is a lister, or yeah, Topspro lister that I always refer to in order to populate or bring up my students' information. It has different buttons across the top. You have the new button to create new students. You can enroll your students in a particular site. Everybody has a record at the Rolling Hills Adult School. In this case, is the agency level. But as you can see, it has different sites depending on their enrollment. So you can choose from this drop-down arrow one of the sites. In this case, let me choose the North Campus. It will have a different list. And I can show you back to the Rolling Hills Adult School. And inside the More button, it means that we have more buttons, not just the ones that you see on the top. So under More, you're going to find this counter. Again, remember the counter that I was telling you in the reports? This counter will give you the amount of students that have activity in the current program year. In this particular case, this report or this lister is showing me the entire school population for the database, 14,923 records. So just to point out this counter, it's inside the More button. We also have, let me click on the drop down and select the North Campus. So I can do that exercise again. I'll click on the More button, and as you can see, there are less students in here because 3,167 are the only ones that have an enrollment for this particular site. And as we can search on other campuses as well, other sites, we can see that the name change or the number changes. All right, so we're going to go back to the Rolling Hills Adult School where we have our entire list of students. And then we have this filter button. The filter button plays a good role in our database because we have some filters embedded by default in all of the reports and all of the listers that we have available that will only pull data for activity for students who have activity in the current program year. So when you click on the filter button, as you can see, the filter right now, the coloring is red, it's supposed to be red. It looks like orange, but the filter button tells you when it's red that it doesn't have any filters right now. If I click on this filter button, I can see that there is this little plus sign, and then also has this little drop down arrow where it says filter. When you click on this filter, it gives you a drop down menu of other information that you can see here. By default, all the filters have this default filter. The default filter means that it is only going to filter for students who have activity in the current program year. So I'm going to click OK on this filter, which is default. And as you saw, this filter now changed the color from red to green. When it's green, it says that you have some filter in place. So this is something really important to take note of every time you're going to look for a student. Sometimes it has been cases where you add a new student and in the database, and then you close it for some reason. Then when you try to open it again, the student is not appearing in that filter. So and then you said, well, why? Because I already saved that information. Then you try to save it again, and then it tells you, no, you already have a student in the system with that information, and we don't accept duplicates or something like that. Then is where you go, where is my student then? Well, it's because the student doesn't have any activity yet. The student is in the database, but the student has not tested yet, has not been enrolled into a program or class, or has any other like hours of instruction or anything like that. So then you would click on the filter button, click on the default. You can simply either click on this remove filter for the current program year, or you would click on the default and click on all. When you click on all, again, and then okay, it brings the entire student population for since ever you started using Topspro Enterprise. That way, you know for sure that you are looking at the entire list of students names, and you should be able to find your student there. Is this all making sense?
Well, Martha, it's Janice. There was one great question in the chat. I know it would be easy for you to show, and I think it would be super helpful if you were going to filter on more than one column. Let's say you wanted to search on, can you demonstrate how you do that, please?
Of course, absolutely. Let's say I want this filter. Well, this doesn't have any filters yet.
Like using the columns, I mean, like if you wanted to search on gender, female, and that's fine.
Yes, absolutely. So I would like to do different filters. Let's say I have a report to provide, or somebody is asking me how many female students we have in this current program year. Well, what I would do first is click on this little filter button. As you can see, every column has a little filter button embedded in there. So I am looking for all the females in this database. So I'll check the female and say, okay. But again, folks, remember that we would need to be specific about this green filter button and make sure that we are doing the default. The default filter means that there are some students that have activity in the current program year, and I don't want to look through the entire database. As you can see, this female filter went away. So because when I did this green filter button, selected the default, it got away of my female filter. So I'll just go ahead and click on it again to reassure that that is being filtered out. And of course, folks, you can also search for any students who are female and in the ethnicity, let's say, that are not Hispanic. Any females that are not Hispanic or Latinos, if you want to look for a specific population. And you don't have to count them all, because remember, inside our more button is our little counter. That way you can see the exact amount of students, and it's 1,046 students which are female and are not Hispanic or Latino in the current program year. This is how you can filter for 2 different columns at the time, and you can filter for many different things at the same time with the same student population and lister. If you click again on the races, you can find, let's say, all who are Filipino, are female, and obviously not Hispanic or Latino, then click on OK. And here you can find a student population. Under the More button, it tells me that we have 32 people with those characteristics. Okay, so this is a way to filter. Definitely, you can do multiple filters, or you can also use the filter feature, which I find that is, it has many more options. If you like to go through this as well, this is a little bit more on the advanced side of the application, but I encourage you to explore it. In case you would have any questions, you can feel free to call us at our tech support hotline, the 1-800 number, which I'm going to post it in just a few moments. So this is how you can filter for multiple categories in here. Any other questions in regards to our menus and how you can generate these reports. Okay, thank you. All right, I see that Tyler posted our phone number and our extension for tech support. Okay, so here in the students demographic listers, folks, I would like to remove all these filters that I created before and just simply clicking on the remove button. Now I'm going to show you how to populate these last name and first name columns, because by default, you will get a full name column. I'll simply right click inside of this gray area in the column header, right click, and you will have a longer list of columns you can populate. You can also click on the columns button, but I find that if you right click, it's kind of easier and simple to just select what you would like to populate as well. In this case, if you would like to say, I want to show the middle name, you can also pull that as another column. And you can actually click on the column and drag it so you can pull it over to a different side. And in this case, I don't know why it's not working. Here, hang on just a second. This should work exactly as how you would pull and drag like any of the columns in an Excel spreadsheet, for instance. But for some reason, my computer or my mouse is not. Let me try it. Let me try this pad right here. Here we go. Okay. So let's say I want to show first name, middle name, and last name. That's how I want it to select. And if I want to alphabetize by last name, I can click on these little sorting buttons, last name, and that way it will sort my lister. It will alphabetize it by last name, starting with A, ending on Z. In this case, these are some numbers, but some bogus records. But starting with the letter A, you can find this order as well. If you don't want to show the middle name, you can right click on it, pull all the way up and hide the middle name. So the column to hide, or the option to hide, is right at the top. So here you can actually expand or narrow down your columns. You have the scrolling bar towards the right, but if you want to populate more columns, like let's say social security number, wherever you want to show that, you can right click and say social security number or SSN. I will show the SSN right here next to ethnicity. But if I want to see ethnicity first, then I would drag the ethnicity column towards the left. Well, I wanted to demonstrate that, but I guess my mouse pad is not cooperating along. But anyway, that is the idea, that you can populate different columns. It works the same. If you click on the columns, you can see the sorting order in here. You can actually pull this down. And here, if you want to show the SSN, the ethnicity before the SSN, I will simply single click on ethnicity, scroll down, and move up by clicking this up button. That way, it will pull the ethnicity up from the SSN, and I will scroll down and say, okay. In your case, like my mouse is not cooperating, I can also do that from the columns lister. And that way I'll see ethnicity first and then the social security number. Okay. I have another question from Elizabeth. Can you save your filters, or do you need to filter every time? That's a really good question, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for bringing that up. So now, once you have customized your columns as how you want it, and you always want to see the list sorted by last name, like alphabetical order. And I also added my social security number, which is very important for me and my agency to see that information. Then I am ready to save these the schema as how I prepared it. And for that, I'm going to click on the More button and then click on this schema option. When I click on schema, it's going to give me this pull down menu. and it already has a default order. I can save it to that because that's how I want it always to see as a default. But and then I'll click save. Let's just save it to the default, and I'll click default, and then that's done. I saved it, and how I can prove it over to you is I'm going to close again the students demographics lister, and every time you open the records, the students, and the demographics lister again, it's going to show me the exact same order that I had asked before. I have it alphabetized from A through C. I have the ethnicity column. I have the social security number next to the ethnicity. That's how I wanted to sort it out. And you have options to save different schemas. Like, for instance, if you want to only search for the female and say okay, and again, what the other search that we were doing before, not Hispanic or Latino, and races. I mean, okay, we don't have to do so many. With 2 is fine. If I wanted to do this female or not Hispanic sorting, then I can also save it as a different schema by clicking more and then schema. And here I would give it a name that would identify that particular sorting, not Hispanic. That way I can save it like that. More schema, female. Why is it not giving me the save button? Let's see, schema. Doesn't want to save for some reason. Anyway, moving along, sometimes this happens in live trainings. This feature is supposed to be showing me the save button enabled so I can save it. And every time I have the different schemas, I can sort them, or I can choose from the default to a different schema. As you can see, this little pull down menu corresponds to the schema button. So I usually have the default filter, but you could have another one here showing a female and not Hispanic for ethnicity. So that way you can also pull down on these, and they work exactly the same as in the filters. So I'm going to give it another try at a later time to demonstrate that if we have a chance at the end of the training. Sorry about that, folks. So now the current program year filter, we already touched on that and how to navigate through the different columns. Any questions so far, folks? Okay, you can give me a little thumbs up if you can on your application, on your Zoom. All right, thank you so much. Okay, folks, so any other questions in regards to the menu? As you notice, you can do many activities. There's many buttons. Please don't feel overwhelmed. Remember, I was there at a point, so there's many options in there, and it's very customizable. Remember that we have the Rolling Hills database for your training purposes, and we have the 800 number, and in case that you have any questions, you can feel free to call us. Now I'm going to turn it over to my coworker, Tyler Fu, who is also a tech support specialist, and I'm going to turn it over then to him. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Tyler, so you can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler, and I will be taking over the second half of the training today. I just want to thank Martha for that good training on the first half, and hope you guys are doing well today. Happy Friday. So I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to jump into the second half of the training. Before I do that, any questions, guys? All right. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so for the next topic that we're going to jump into, we're going to go into the Navigator, and its use and its purpose. So to find a navigator, the navigator would be always with the student profile. As you saw earlier, you may have saw the setup navigator with the reports, but the main feature of the navigator is to jump right into different records or different data for students. So, and I'll show you that right now. And I am using the Rolling Hills. I'm going to bring up a student in the demographics lister. Okay, guys, so right here we have the list, the demographics lister. I'm going to go straight into a student. I'm just going to pick any random student. I'm going to look at Tommy's student profile here. So once I click on Tommy's profile, we're going to have the student information pop up. You're going to see the demographic information here. And on the left side, you're going to see the navigator. So you can think of the navigator as like a shortcut into your students' records, your students' child records. So child records, you may hear this sometimes in the using Topspro Enterprise. Child records are everything that follows from the parent record. The parent record is your main record where let's say, for example, your student ID, that would be your parent record. Everything else that follows from that would be your child record. So the navigator gives you quick and easy access into your child record. As you can see here, we have the demographic information. It starts with student ID, name, just basic information here. And if we use a navigator on the left side, we can just kind of scroll down from there. We have in-program years. That would be a child record. That would be something that follows the main parent record. So if you can see here, it's a quick and easy way to access these records. So we'll go to, the next one would be student records and class enrollments records, class records, program enrollments. I'm just going to go through all of this quickly. Program records and tests. Later on, I'm going to show you guys how to add test records manually. But so the navigator, yeah, it's a quick and convenient way to access these. If once you access your student profile from the demographics lister. Okay, guys. Any questions from there? Pretty easy there. So the next topic I'm going to jump into is how to edit your student information. If given that your student information is already existing, let's say for Tommy, we're going to stick with Tommy, the student here. And for example, you have Tommy's student ID already established. You have, his name, Tommy. And if, let's say, any information that you want to edit, if something was a mistake, let's say a student ID was a mistake that was made on when Tommy entered into e-tests, and you can always have the ability to change this later on. So if you go into edit view, you have student information here. You have the demographic information here. This edit mode, it's going to look like a pencil. So we call it the pencil icon. Anytime you see that, that gives you the ability to edit anything that's available here. So if you click on that, it will open up all these fields and give you the chance to edit anything. So let's go back to the example. If the student ID is incorrect, you have the ability to change it anytime later on. So let's say if Tommy student ID doesn't have a 3 at the end, you can just simply delete that 3. If given that this student ID doesn't exist already, every student ID is unique for every student. So if if this is a duplicate, the TE will flag the student ID and say that there is another student ID that's available with that ID number. Okay, so you can always go in here and edit anything. You can edit the education information here, ethnicity, address. So you have the ability to make those changes later on. You can also change this in, let's say you're finished here, you want to save it. And if, let's say, there is a record in program years or anything of that sort, you can go into that record and then edit that also. So it doesn't have to be the demographic. It can be any other records that you can make edits to. Okay, guys, any questions?
Hey, Tyler. Well, I guess
Yes, Martha.
this is gonna be a little bit along the way when we talk about adding records manually, about how to generate Topspro Enterprise ID numbers for students. Probably a little bit later, can you demonstrate how the Topspro Enterprise have the ability to create student records, student ID numbers?
Yes, and Martha, you're meaning the randomization of student ID?
Yes,
records?
exactly. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's a good topic. We will definitely go into that later on.
Perfect.
And
Thank
Martha,
you.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, guys. Any other questions? So that's editing student information.
Hi,
Oh.
Tyler. I actually had a question before you move on in regards to what you went over about editing a student ID. Because recently I was looking at some records and realized that there were a few students who had additional digits to their ID. And when I went to edit to remove them and I went to save, it did show it said I had a duplicate and it didn't allow me to save it. So does that mean that I already have that student with that correct ID?
Yes, Marilyn. So if you have a student ID that already exists and you try to change that other student's ID to that one, it's gonna flag it. The program is gonna say that that student ID already exists. So there you can let's say, for example, two students are the same, and if you have the ability to merge also, but from what I'm hearing, there are two different students, correct?
Well, it looks like it's probably the same student, but it's just another record that was saved with an additional digit to that ID. We don't know how that happened, but if it's saying when I save it, it says it's duplicated, then it's telling me that there's already a student with that same ID, which I believe is the same student. Just there was an error with that student ID.
Gotcha. So it may be from an import, but you can definitely merge it.
Okay.
That's something you can do also.
All right. How do we do about merging? Is that something you cover or
If you want, after the training, give us a call. We'll go over how to merge, but it's actually not something I will cover for the training basics.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys. So moving on from there, and maybe Martha or Janice can send a document on merging, but if you guys want, you guys can give us a call and we'll go through that after the training. So transitioning from here, I would like to just kind of take a survey of the participants before we go on to the next topic. I would like to ask if anyone uses a third-party system. How do you guys register your students? How do you guys track demographic information? You guys can feel free to call it out or type it in the chat. So if anyone uses a third-party system, how do you guys register your students? how do you guys track demographic information? Okay, so I see main stars. Okay, ASAP's a popular one. Aries another popular one. ASAP, okay. Oasis. Okay, so a good amount of people use third-party programs here. Okay. So ASAP's a very popular one. The reason why I ask these questions is because this next part of the training may deviate from the usual process of inputting agency data, user data, or class data. Just want to assure you that this is still very useful information, and there are some scenarios where you may have to input these data manually. So this segues into what I'm gonna talk about in the training next. Okay, so thank you guys for providing that information. Okay, I see banner there. Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on into adding data manually. So I want to demo how to add sites. So sites would pertain to organization. It would pertain to agencies. So if we go into organization, and then under sites, we click on that, we're gonna have a list of all these sites that we've created already. And it's you're gonna have a column that says is e-test site. So keep that in mind. We have 5 sites right here that are for e-testing. So you have the ability to create sites that don't have e-test, or will be able to have e-test. So you have the ability to do that. So in order to create a new site, we can just simply go to this lister, and there's this option right here that you can click, and then it will give you the ability to create a new site. From this page right here, you're gonna have the container drop down. You can leave it as your agency. Site ID would be a unique, usually just a number or a digit or 2. In this case, I'll use 10. Site name, you can give it any name you'd like. So I'll use new site. And then this is the option to have this site as an e-test site or not. So if, you know, for this training, I'll make it an e-test site. And you have the ability to add site contact if you want. It's not required. If you want to just do that, it'd be just typing your first name of the contact. And it's going to ask for address, phone number, cell phone number. For this, I'll just click save. And now we have a new site created, and its site ID is 10, and it's called new site. We're going to go back into the site lister. And as you can see right there, it's going to have all the information that I just added. Site ID, site name is new site, and it is a e-test site. Okay, so you're going to be able to test at this site. These other sites right here that were created, it won't be able to be on e-test site for testing. And then the contact name right here. Okay, guys, any questions on this? Okay, moving on from there, I'm gonna go into demoing how to add users and manage users. So we're gonna go back into the organization menu, and then we're gonna go into users. So right off the bat, we have a ton of users for the Rolling Hills, but your agency may have like 10, 20 users. This is the Rolling Hills, and it's going to have a lot. So it's going to give you a list of the container that your users are at. It's going to give the first and last name. So to add a new user, we would simply click on that new button, similar to the last topic we had. So we click on that, and then the user information will pop up here. It's going to ask you what container you want to have your new user be associated with. So in this case, you can actually place your new user at different sites. Or you could place them at the agency. The agency, they're going to have access to all the sites. If you want your user to be at a specific site, let's say for new site, they only have access to that new site, and they can't access any other site. Okay, guys? So for this example, I'll just use it as the Rolling Hills agency. So this user will have access to the whole agency. User account, we would usually use an email. Password, you can either create a password for that user, or you can give a temporary password so that that actual user could create their own password. Just make sure you check this box off if it's a temporary password. And then from there, the minimum information will be first name, last name, and then email. Okay. So that would be the minimum requirement to create a user in Topspro Enterprise. And then you want to click save. Okay. And then if we go back into this lister here, we should be able to see amongst all these other users right there. That's our new user now. So we know that that user is in Topspro Enterprise and can be able to access Topspro now. Okay, guys. Any questions? I'm just going to power through this. So next topic would be how class definition and class instances. They both would be under organization. So if we click on that menu again, organization, and then it's going to be in classes. So we have both definitions and instances. So for class definition, we are simply creating this as hence the term definition. We're defining that class for the first time in Topspro Enterprise. And as I mentioned earlier, the parent record it is the main record, and then everything else follows from that. So the parent record from this would be the class definition, because we're simply defining that class. We're putting it into Topspro for the very first time. As you can see here, there's a couple of class definitions already created. So in order to create a new class definition, it would be organization, classes, and then definitions. And this lister will show up. And in the same location as other listers, you're going to click on that new. So this gives you an ability to create your new class definition. It consists of having that class ID, which you can just create any random ID if you like. And then extended ID is, let's say you have a spring semester, a fall semester, summer semester. That is your extended, that's the purpose of the extended ID. And it would, that same class would still be using that same class ID. But if, let's say you have a fall class or a spring class, you can use that extended ID to kind of separate those classes, but they are still considered the same class ID. So you can use that definitely to kind of separate those classes. Class description, you can give it a name. And then these are optional, you don't need it. the CIP code and 822 course code. You don't need that. So that is your class definition. And also you want to have it at a site. It can't be at an agency. So if you click on this drop down and you have your sites available there, I'm going to click the new site we created. And again, it has to be at a site. It can't be at the agency. Okay. So now we click save. So now we have our class definition into Topspro Enterprise. So classes are on a rolling basis, meaning they happen by program years. So that's where the class instance comes in, and that's having it that class come around for different years. You want to bring that up. So class definition is defining that class, and then class instance is when that class has taken place. So if we go in, if we try and find that class that we just created, and we can use a filter here. Okay, so that is a new class I just created earlier. So I'm going to double click into that class definition. And again, on the left side, Navigator, we can access these child records. We have the ability to go into class instance. There are no class instance. So if we want to have our class start this program year, we can create a new class instance in the left-hand corner here, the new button. And so it gives you the ability to attach a program year. You have 2021 as the current program year, so you can select that. And it's automatically going to populate for the class definition. It's going to show up there. And then class start date, usually it just auto-populates for July 1st. Class end date, June 30th. That's the fiscal year, so it's going to automatically populate. And you have the ability to select if it's which program this class is for, basic skills, ESL, citizenship. So you can select any of those. Special programs, if it's Civics or family literacy program, you can check any of those boxes off there. Transition focus, focus area, you have the ability to choose those. Intensity, we're going to go down and look at this. Intensity, when does the class take place? If it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you can choose those. Class duration in minutes, I can do 60 minutes per class. And then from there, once we're done, we can click save. And now we have a class instance, and this class instance is taking place in 2021. Okay, guys, any questions? Okay, moving on. I'm gonna go into adding student records. So we can do that through finding a student. Again, it's records, students, demographics. We can choose any of these students. Maybe this time I'll choose Jonathan. Okay, so once I go into Jonathan's profile here, again, back to the Navigator, if we have some information for Jonathan, as far as if he attended in this current program year, you can go straight into that section. And then as you can see here, there's no in-program years for Jonathan, so we can add a new program year. We click on that new button again, same area right there in that upper left-hand corner. And program year, you can specify the program year that Jonathan was in, 2021, site enrollment. So it gives you the ability to specify all these information for your student. And same thing, if you go into student records, you have the ability to add a new student record. You can have information such as primary goals, secondary goals, instructional levels, and it's in the same area as always, upper left-hand corner. You click on New. Class enrollment. Same thing here. If let's say you have your class already established into TE, you can enroll the student into that class. Keep in mind that you need a class instance to make that happen. You can't just do it with the class definition. You have to have a class instance. So once that's all set, you can click New and then attach that class with Jonathan here, the student. Class records. So once you have your class instance in class enrollments, you can start adding logging hours where Jonathan had attended certain days, and it's going to have those lists of hours that he attended, and for which class ID or class extended ID and class name. So class records will show that. And again, you can create a new record with this new button. Program enrollments, what program enrollment was Jonathan in for 2021? You can add ABE or ESL. Program records, same thing here. You can create a new program record pertaining to which instructional program, and record date. If the student had left the program, or if the student is still current in program, you can specify that here. And same thing, if you click on that new button, it's going to pop up there. And we're going to go into tests, and this may be an important part of the training where I think this happens quite commonly actually. So a lot of students do a paper test, and we have to input these paper tests into Topspro manually. So this is where we go and access that. So in the Navigator, it'd be under tests. And then if you have those scores available to you, you can create it into Topspro by clicking this new button. And it's going to ask you which program year was the student, or when did the student take the test, in which program year. You can say 2021. You can attach a class instance. It's not required, but you can do that if you want. Assessment date. You want to specify when that test was taken. So let's say the student took the test on April 12th. Okay, and then site. We can specify the site at where the student was taking the test at. So we'll say our new site. And the assessment type, we can check off if it's a fixed form or appraisal or locator. In this example, I'll do fixed form. And let's say the student is an ABE student and took the math test on April 12th. So you can type in that form number, and we have the math goals form pop up here. So the student took the 913M on April 12th. You can select that. If you have all the answers, you can actually input them here manually. If you don't have the answers that the student used on the test, you don't have to do that. But if you have the raw score, you can actually just click on the score override and then type in that score, the raw score out of 40 questions the student answered. So you can type in the amount of questions the student got correct. And so the scale score will be computed by the raw score that was entered. So if you click save, and you may see it right off the bat. Yeah, so the scale score would be a 212 for the 913M. Okay, guys, so that is entering your tests manually. So that's important if your students are paper testing and you want to input that into Topspro manually. Okay, guys, I see that we have a couple more minutes left here. Any other questions so far? Martha, Janice, if you guys want to chime in.
No, I'm all set here. Tyler, good job. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tyler. And thank you everybody for staying along with us the entire time here. We're almost about time to finish our training. One last thing that I think it is important for us to let you know how to export records. I don't know, Tyler, since you're already sharing your screen, can you please navigate for me? And you can export, folks, listers that you have in Topspro Enterprise. This is just going to take a couple minutes. Like you like to export a list of students that match some specific criteria. You may have a request from your administrator or your director of somebody who is wanting to give you to get some results or some information at least. You can go to the records menu, click on demographics and records, students, and then demographics. We can probably grab a list of students that meet a specific criteria, as we were doing some searches earlier, like gender, looking for any females that have, let's say, let's bring the birth date, or I'm sorry, the age. Can you right click on one of the columns and show age? So we can see, let's say we want to search for any females that have between 35 and 45 years of age. That is something that we can do. We can pull up from the database and export that immediately so we can send it over to our administrator, director via email. That is going to give us a list of records. We can click on the More button to see the account. We have 2601 students who are female and who are between the ages of 35 and 45. And we can again sort this lister as how we want to display it. We can sort it by name, so we can alphabetize all that, or we can sort it by ages. So it starts at the minimum age group of 35 or from 45 and down. That is another thing that we can do. Once we have established our lister, how we want to export it, we can then click on either the More button or the Export button if you have it on top. But in this case, click on the Export button, and then you can just click on the simple export. There's other options, as you can see, to export WIOA third-party demographic data, HSE exam results, or the other. But in this case, can you click cancel? We're going to do a simple export without any other information. So if you click More, Export, and then click on Export on the top, that's a simple way to export. And then you would just choose an area in your computer to save that file. Then you can save it as an Excel spreadsheet. Another way to export this, okay, and then you're going to get a message whenever your export operation has completed. So go ahead and click on that. Can you open the file for us, Tyler? Okay, so it's the students lister is going to show up exactly as you're going to look in a minute, as an Excel spreadsheet, including all those records with female between the ages of 35 and 45. And then you can send this via email to your director. Another way, can we minimize this? Another way to quickly export it as like a report style is that you can click on the More button. When we have the lister, click on the More button and click on Print. When we click on Print, you can click on the preview, and then you're going to see it looks a little more elegant way, or as in a report style. And you're going to see the same information. You're going to see only females between the ages of 35 and 45. And you can just simply export this one as well by clicking the export button and send that over to your administrator. And it looks as a PDF file. So you have multiple options to export as Excel spreadsheet, as a PDF, and a simple export will do that. So any other questions, folks? I know that we have so much to cover. I would like to tell you everything about Topspro Enterprise, but unfortunately we just have an hour and a half, and I really appreciate for everybody staying along this way. Any other questions or anything else that you would like to see in future trainings, I would be grateful if you can send us an email to techsupport@casas.org. And hopefully we can create other training modules like Topspro Enterprise Intermediate. That sounds really good, Janice. Or an advanced class for Topspro Enterprise users. So thank you so much again. I would remind you to please save the chat to your computer. If you are looking at the chat pod right now, you can click on those little 3 buttons at the bottom right where it says file, and save the chat into your computer. That way you will save all those helpful links that we have shared so far. And if you have any additional questions or you feel like we have not addressed something in particular, I would just stay along here with you to the end so we can address them. Okay, but on my end, that is all. Tyler, if you would like to say goodbye.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone coming. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Janice. Hope you guys have a great day. Thank you.
Yes, that is a good question again, Cindy. We are going to save this recording and post it on our YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel where we have multiple webinars and other recordings for other trainings that we've had in the past. All right, folks. Well, thank you. That is it for us. I will stay on the line here for a few more minutes to address any other further questions that you would like to ask. But that is all for us. Hopefully have a great weekend. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Martha, this is Megan Jones in Illinois. I posted a question in the chat regarding our DAISY system. Do you know if there's any linkage that we can use to have an interface between those 2 systems?
Well, that is a very good question, Megan. I thank you so much for it. Honestly, I have not heard of that system. Maybe our programming team has. I am going to I posted a link for the Topspro data exchange specifications. If you can get an export sample file of your DAISY program, hopefully it can match the specifications here in our document that I just put a link for. And hopefully our programming team can troubleshoot with that. Then they'll send you a code, like a vendor code, so it's approved and you're able to import successfully from that program. So I guess it would be a matter of talking with your DAISY system or the programmers in there and see if they can do an export like that. Have you done exports from that program?
We have not. I mean, I've exported to Excel before, but never into another database system. So, but I know many other programs in our state use your testing system. So I'll be curious to find out if our state has taken into account that ability to link up the 2 systems, because that would really improve our data entry if we could have the systems talk to each other.
Absolutely. Yes, it would need a CSV file. So hopefully they can do that from your system.
Thank you.
Anybody else with any other questions?
Just what's the name of your YouTube channel?
It's CASAS.org. Let me put a link here on the chat pod. Yeah, so I just go to YouTube, and when in the search box, I'll just do CASAS.org, and that will pull up our videos. So let me go to the homepage of the YouTube channel. Yeah, I should have posted that a little bit earlier in the training, but here it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And then, of course, once in the YouTube channel, you can just click on the search box and type in like TE basics or whichever topic you would like to learn about. Mhm. Okay, it says we have students leave the program recently because they got jobs. Do you recommend updating in Topspro? Of course, yes, we do recommend updating them. Absolutely, that will set them a date where they were updated, and of course, increase their ability to appear on reports, and all that information will get accounted. Okay, thank you, Carla. All right. Any other questions, folks? It looks like we're down to a few people here in the training room. Anybody else interested on asking anything else? All right. So I'll go ahead and stay here for a few moments with my colleagues, Janice and Tyler. So thank you so much for joining us. You can go ahead and end your Zoom meeting now. Thank you, Leanne, for joining. You can click the end button now. Thank you. All right. How are you guys doing?
Nice job. Very nice job, both of you.
Thank you, Janice. Let me go ahead and stop the recording because I think I still have the recording here. Stop recording.